Jody Wilson-Raybould, get your officers to stand down.
Tonight, the Trudeau government doesn't really have the certainty it sought in Secwepemc territory.
What communities really need to look at is becoming self-sufficient, self-sustaining.
The largest solar farm in Manitoba is up and running on a First Nation.
Your mind's going to want to stay in English, and that colonized part of your mind is not going to want to let go of some territory.
And keeping Indigenous languages alive takes a whole new way of thinking. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Indigenous activist and tiny house warrior Kanahus Manuel was arrested over the weekend. Manuel has been a vocal opponent of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. 3 tiny houses are being placed along the pipeline route. On Saturday morning, officers arrived at North Thompson River Park to uphold an eviction notice served earlier in the week. Despite repeatedly stating RCMP have no jurisdiction in unceded Secwepemc territory, Manuel was still arrested and taken into custody. BC RCMP say Manuel was released on a series of conditions and promised to appear before the courts at a later date. Tiny house warriors have since moved from the park to Blue River, where camps are expected to be established for pipeline workers. Manuel was broadcasting live on Facebook and delivered a message to Federal Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Tell your officers to stand down. This is nation business. Indigenous, sovereign, nation business. Jody Wilson-Raybould, get your officers to stand down now.
Allegations of abuse at a daycare are under RCMP investigation on Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. With more, here's our colleagues at CTV Winnipeg.
Located next to a Child and Family Services office and across the road from RCMP, a daycare where Mounties are now investigating allegations of abuse. Peguis Free Spirits Child Care Center is run by the First Nation. The relative of a child who attended Free Spirits did not want to be identified, but says the daycare called an emergency parent meeting this week after many families heard rumblings of the allegations.
They heard from other sources, and they went and started pulling their children out of daycare. It's very shocking. Everybody is sick to their stomachs not knowing, what happened to these children.
Peguis First Nation Chief Glenn Hudson tells CTV News the Band Council became aware of the allegations a week and a half ago, and 3 employees have been let go. Declining further comment, Hudson says the investigation is in the proper hands with the authorities. The RCMP confirms there is an active and ongoing investigation, but says it won't be releasing any more information until the investigation is complete.
I'm hoping that it's transparent for people to know what happened to these children.
Gabrielle Marchand, CTV News, Winnipeg.
A new report by Environment and Climate Change Canada states the Wood Buffalo National Park, Canada's largest national park, is being threatened by man-made and natural causes. A 500-page report shows that the Peace and Athabasca River water levels are being drastically lowered by dams and climate change. The report states the Athabasca River level has dropped 26% since the Bennett Dam in BC was built in 1968. Though the federal government has pledged $27 million to help preserve the park, the lower water levels are threatening the muskrat and buffalo populations in the area.
Buffalo habitat shrinking. The buffalo can't even come around to roam anymore because the thistle have overtaken the food source, and that's from drying up of the delta. So if you see the park drying up, our reserve and our delta is drying up rapidly. We're left to defend for ourselves and continue to live and harvest off the land as much as we can, but even that is becoming a threat to our way of living.
And we'd like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca. Like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. As some First Nations continue to struggle with digging in the ground to create economic opportunities, one Manitoba community is looking up to the sky for solutions. And as Brittany Hobson shows us, they are paving the way for other First Nations in the province to do the same.
Yes, so we just finished putting up farm paneling yesterday.
Canahus Sinclair is used to hands-on work. The mother of 3 calls herself a jack of all trades.
I always enjoyed working around Fish River. I did a lot of work here at home. I was with housing, I was at the hotel, and just helping out wherever I can. And I love working and different people and doing different things.
Sinclair can now add another skill set to her tool belt. She's part of a group from Fisher River Cree Nation who are building a solar farm in the community. 4 weeks ago, she knew nothing about renewable energy.
It's pretty amazing. I'm just learning too and asking questions and, as I go along every day and, learn something new every day.
She's not alone. Much of the 10-person crew has spent the past month learning the technical aspects of building a solar farm.
It's a global thing. It's going to be big in Canada, so I thought, why not?
For Daniel Monius, the opportunity to learn something new prompted him to sign up for the training course. And now he's ready to take his skills elsewhere.
It's all new to me. This is my first year. I'm going to try to keep on it after this too. Yeah, do it wherever I can go.
The project began 7 years ago when the community started looking at different green energy projects it could invest in.
What communities really need to look at is becoming self-sufficient, self-sustaining.
Fisher River teamed up with W Dusk Energy Group, an Indigenous-owned firm, to facilitate the project. David Isaac is the lead developer for W Dusk. He says other First Nations should look at what Fisher River is doing if they want to create economic opportunities.
Strictly from a economic development perspective, this project will look to create an annual source of income for at least 20 years at a time, but these will probably be running north of 50 years.
Nearly 3,000 panels line this land, generating enough energy to power up to 400 homes, making it the largest solar farm in Manitoba. Installation isn't complete yet, but the community is already looking at expanding.
There's already discussions underway to look at expansion of this new solar farm, where we may bump it up to a 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe even larger solar farm, which will generate more revenue for the community.
Once up and running, the project can generate $80,000 to $100,000 per year that will go right back to the community. But Isaac says it's not all about the money. Green energy projects often align with First Nations ideologies.
When you're involved in this type of technology where it resonates with cultural values and philosophies, it doesn't harm the land, there's something beyond just electrons that occurs in communities, and that's the magic we love to witness and be part of.
For Sinclair, being a part of the project goes beyond the money. It means much more.
I love it. I love giving back because my community gave me so much.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Fisher River Cree Nation.
This past weekend, Huron-Wendat territory near Quebec City was the site of a gathering that was generations in the making. Over 100 First Nations youth met with elders from across Quebec to learn traditional ways. The hope that their past will be handed down so it can be part of their present and future. Tom Fenario explains.
In her time, Elizabeth Ashini has prepared many a partridge for dinner. But it's not often the 76-year-old Innu elder has an audience while doing so.
Ça va très bien. Mes jeunes ils ont bien appris, et puis ils ont bien écouté, puis ils ont bien fait ça aussi, puis ils posent des questions.
Yet it wasn't until her 50s that Ashini perfected how to deplume and butcher a partridge. Although she lived in the woods on Quebec's North Shore as a child, she was taken to a residential school at the age of 9.
Moi, depuis 20 ans, 25 ans, que je suis retournée dans ma communauté, travailler pour ma communauté, puis c'est là que j'ai repris qu'est-ce que ma mère m'a enseigné, question dans le bois.
Now Ashini is one of the elders teaching over 100 First Nation youth traditional ways at this weekend gathering. 25-year-old Mi'kmaq man Cedric Gray-Leou says he's grateful to learn more about living off the land after growing up off reserve, even if some of the workshop is arduous. For you, what's the trickiest part here?
The tiny, tiny, tiny feathers that Misawashi keeps reminding me that I have to remove again and again and again when I think I'm done.
I'm going to be a Bannock pro.
Yeah.
Some of the other workshops being offered over the weekend include making bannock over a campfire, trapping game.
The beaver is the best meat for attracting animals that you trap,
as well as sharing a variety of First Nation songs and dances. Jean-Sébastien Vollon works with the Quebec Region AFN Youth Council that organized this gathering. The Inuman says that the weekend is about more than just passing down traditions. It's also about healing.
C'est ce que ce rassemblement-là peut aider à des gens qui sont dans la toxicomanie ou tout ça. Il va voir des ateliers sur des médecines traditionnelles. Ça va pouvoir beaucoup les aider aussi, que ce soit en toxicomanie ou encore peu importe des maladies mentales ou des maladies physiques.
According to a recently released health report on First Nations in Quebec, half of young adults and nearly a quarter of adolescents drink excessively, while high rates of cyber addiction and obesity point to increasingly sedentary and unhealthy lifestyles. The hope is that the youth here will not only use traditional knowledge to combat these ugly trends, but also go back to their communities to encourage others.
On l'a fait l'année passée, il y avait moins de jeunes que ça. Cette année, il y en a beaucoup plus. Puis l'année prochaine, j'imagine que ça va augmenter encore. Là.
During her workshop, Elizabeth Ashini described being raised in a time of famine and how catching a partridge could be the difference between life and death. While the stakes may not be as high for the youth here, they still grasp the importance of learning the old ways.
The best way to know what we lost and what was taken from us is to have it from the people who still care. And I just want to thank them a lot. Merci, Elisabeth.
For Ashini, she's grateful that, unlike her, nobody here will have to wait until their 50s to learn traditional ways.
Ça me fait plaisir de faire ça, puis j'espère que ça va continuer à l'avenir, que les jeunes ne laisseront pas aller laisser leur culture, leur langue, leur identité.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Saint-Léonard-de-Pont-Neuf, Quebec.
Camp at the Calgary Stampede is getting a name change for the first time in more than a century. Details on that after the break. Here's a look at Tuesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 28 for Fredericton and Charlottetown. 31 for Happy Valley Goose Bay, 13 in Nain. Showers and a high of 20 for Sept-Îles, 19 in Val-d'Or and Chibougamau, 27 in Windsor, Toronto and Ottawa, 26 in Peterborough, 23 in Thunder Bay and Sioux Lookout, 17 in Wawa, a warm day in northern Manitoba, 28 under the sun in Flin Flon and the Pas, sunny and 28 as well in Dauphin and Brandon. A warm day across much of Saskatchewan, 32 in Regina and Swift Current, 33 in Saskatoon, 29 on Tuesday in Meadow Lake and La Ronge. Welcome back. It's almost a lost art form, the ability to speak your mother tongue. Many communities are trying to hold on to their Indigenous languages, the one thing that holds secrets to who they really are. Shirley McLean has more.
This is the perfective, right? So if we're going to talk about...
The classroom setting has become the commonplace these days to learn an Indigenous language. Today's lessons are in Tlingit, being taught by Lance Twitchell from the University of Southeast Alaska. Tlingit is not his first language, but he's committed to becoming a fluent speaker.
Tlingit, it's just a different thought process, both in terms of time, space, how things work. And so we're continually just fine-tuning folks to say, well, you're thinking about that in English, and you could think about that with your Tlingit brain.
The lessons are complex grammar where the student needs to step out of their English-thinking mind and feel the Tlingit language.
That means we're going to have to decolonize your mind because your mind's going to want to stay in English, and that colonized part of your mind is not going to want to let go of some territory.
There are only 2 communities in the Yukon that speak Tlingit, a language that migrated from southeast Alaska into the southern Yukon communities of Teslin and Carcross. There's only a handful from birth speakers left in the Yukon, and most of them are sitting at these tables. Their role is to help create second language learners.
Once we get enough of those, we could start making birth speakers again. And when you teach someone a language from birth, you don't have to explain the grammar of a language. But if you want to learn a second language, you have to comprehend just how the language thinks, because languages, they have their own processes of understanding and describing the world. So then we have to sort of contrast that with English all the time. But with a birth speaker, you don't have to do that.
A few years ago, Deborah Berg decided she wanted to learn the language when she was pregnant with her daughter.
I just thought, wow, you know, this language is so beautiful and we can't let it die. So that's why I'm here today, trying to hold this chance of a lifetime for anyone to come and learn Tlingit. And there's a pretty good turnout in there right now, and makes me makes me very happy.
Okay. There's groups of people out there who want this, and that we can develop the tools to give it to them. And then we can have people speak to their kids, and kids can learn a language from birth. And we can come full circle with this thing to a point where I could see us looking back and saying, that was when we almost lost it.
Without the language, there would be no culture. The elders in Twitchell say it's the bind that holds the nation together. Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Carcross, Yukon.
Great story. Back to British Columbia now, where First Nations faith leaders and environmentalists want the BC government to enact a law that would force fossil fuel companies to pay for any damages they cause to the environment. According to West Coast environmental law, it's the taxpayers that pay the brunt of the costs associated with climate change. The new bill being proposed would be similar to Ontario's Liability for Climate-Related Harm Act. 50 organizations have signed the letter that was hand-delivered to Premier John Horgan's office today.
Some parts of the province are facing wildfires that are increasing in severity and frequency every year, and some parts are affected by flooding and drought, and here on the coast we have sea level rise. And so there's different climate impacts that are already happening across the province, and those come with a huge price tag, and we aren't prepared to shoulder those costs.
The Calgary Stampede will no longer be calling its display of Indigenous culture the Indian Village. The name, which has been used since the Stampede began over a century ago, will be changed to Elbow River Camp. The new name reflects the location of the camp, which is where the Elbow and Bow Rivers merge. Stampede says the change was led by the TP owners. With support from the Stampede, and the owners made the final decision. Spokesperson for the TP owners say that it was time to make a change.
The stigma around the world, it is time for change because Mother Earth is changing, so everybody has to change.
Why is one of the world's largest social media platforms touring the Yukon? We'll find out after the break. Here's a look at the rest of Tuesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 25 under the sun in High Level, Fort Chipewyan and Peace River. A scorcher in southern part of the province, 35 in Medicine Hat, 33 in Lethbridge. Just as warm for parts of the BC interior. 34 in Penticton, 35 in Kamloops. 27 in Prince George, 26 in Fort St. John, 24 in Fort Nelson. Cloudy across much of the Yukon, rain, and 17 in Mayo. In the NWT, 25 in Fort Liard, 24 in Fort Simpson, 23 in Trout Lake. A high of +4 for Sachs Harbour, 9 in Pawlatuck. In Nunavut, rain and 20 in Arviette, 22 in Baker Lake, +6 in Iqaluit on Tuesday, 8 in Clyde River and Pangertown. Welcome back. One of the world's largest social media platforms is touring the North to find out how Northerners are connecting online and also teaching them how to grow their small business. Here again is Shirley McLean with more.
And we're actually launching our first Connecting Canada's Rural Communities Facebook event here in the Yukon.
It looks like your average conference with people who use the latest technology to take notes, or the old-fashioned way. And that's what this seminar hosted by Facebook Canada is doing, to teach Northerners how to get online and use social media to connect their communities and boost small businesses.
You can imagine in a community where there's maybe 100, 200 people, it's actually feasible to get everybody into the same group.
Kevin Chan is with Facebook Canada. He says rural northern communities use Facebook differently than the South, more as a public service announcement board.
We were up in Churchill at some point. We heard that if a parent is looking for their child, rather than calling around and trying to figure out where their child is, they just post in the group. Have you seen Jimmy? Tell Jimmy to come home, it's time for dinner. These are just really interesting community-focused ways to use groups that you just don't see, obviously, in other parts of the country down south.
I've been looking to learn more. I don't know much about how to use social media to boost my business and to promote anything that I'm making or doing.
Yukon entrepreneurs like fashion designer Brenda Asp have created their own pages to showcase their work.
I use it to post when I'm going to be at an event, like a fashion show or a sale show or something.
Her designs are hitting the local runways and other shows across the nation. But Asp wants to learn how to expand her reach to hit a global market. Today's seminar showed Asp how to manage her page where she can actually see hard numbers of how many views, interactions, and where her customers' base is.
You have to be consistent and use it on a regular basis. But I know that when I do post, people ask where to buy and stuff like that. So it does create a bit of a insight into what people want.
The potential is huge with 23 million Canadian users. Asp, with her new business tools, is sure to find the right customers to connect to what she's selling. Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Carcross, Yukon.
That's your APTN National News for this Monday. For the latest headlines, you can always visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.